From the 8th grade, I wanted to be a cartoonist, so my path was set then. My mother drew, my father drew pictures, brothers and sisters, 2 sisters. We didn't have TV or anything, so we entertained ourselves by reading comics and drawing and making up stories. We had lots of meals together and big discussions and big arguments, and my dad loved to get into politics and philosophy, and we would argue and communicate with one another, forcefully sometimes. But I think that really helped in my cartooning career because I figured people, didn't like me, but if they knew me, they would like me. You love the ideas, and you don't like some ideas, but you always love the people. And so I never felt rejected if I said something stupid. I went to college for 1 year at Adams State and then joined the Army because our professor, Dr. Peterson at Adams State, made Europe look so interesting that I wanted to go to Europe, and so the only way I could go to Europe was join the Army, and that's how I wound up in Germany. Marge and I got married in Germany in '64, and we dated one time in high school. We went to high school together in the same class, and we went to the same church and all of that. So while in the Army, we started writing to one another. She was at DU, and we fell in love through the mail. My first job out of college was teaching at Aspen in the high school and middle school for a year, and then I went to Taos, and I taught school in Taos for a while. I thought New Mexico was a good place to live, and the Santa Fe paper was big enough to afford an editorial cartoonist, so that was my plan. And of course they didn't need an editorial cartoonist, but they needed an ad salesman, and so I took the ad manager position in Taos, which was a sister paper there. And so it was really a fun time in our life. But I think I was just doing cartoons for free. And then later on, I think I was charging $15 a cartoon, or $5, yeah, maybe. And then I was making a living for a few years just traveling to college campuses and drawing caricatures. I could leave Taos, and I hardly have any money. I just had enough money in my pocket to get to Oklahoma or wherever I was going, and then I could make a couple $100 in a day and then come home with enough money to get us by for a month. We were planning to come to Colorado Springs because we just thought this is a great city to live in. But I really did want to pursue the cartooning angle, and I went to the Gazette first, and Marge and I prayed in the parking lot, and they didn't want me, and so I went to the Sun, and I told them that I could do editorial cartoons and showed them my local cartoons, and I said I could do local cartoons for the Sun, and it was competitive paper, so they could see an advantage in having local cartoons. And so I said I could do 1 or 2 of these a week, and if you want to run it, then it'll be $15 a cartoon. But there was no obligation. So instead of looking for somebody to hire me as a cartoonist, my mind has changed over to looking for places where I could maybe be helpful to people. That approach meant very little risk on their part. And then when they saw it worked to their advantage, then they offered me a job, and that's how I got my first cartooning job. I think I started out doing about 5 cartoons a week for them, plus a lot of illustrations and other things. Then it worked into 7 cartoons a week. I was with the Sun for 8 years, and then in '86 it closed, and the Gazette bought it out. And so I freelanced for a year with the Denver Post and artist in residence at Cheyenne Mountain Resort. I did caricatures over there and did some artwork. And then the Gazette asked me to come on in 1986. What I would do is get up early, walk to the Gazette from the west side, because that gives me time to sort of brainstorm, and then I would spend the morning reading, and I would jot down ideas that looked like they might be fruitful. And it's like shooting ducks. Every day you just go, and ideas are like ducks. They just fly over, and well, all you got to do is just shoot one and then dress it and get it ready for a meal, and that's the way ideas work. I start the idea process by saying, well, how do I feel about this issue? And then I take it to a next step and say, well, it's sort of similar to, Little Red Riding Hood, or I could find an analogy or something. And then if the idea process sort of goes in a circular way and gets larger, and then finally you kind of capture something, and then you sketch it out very roughly so that the editors can kind of capture the idea where I'm going with it. I'd bounce it off the editorial page editor, and he would give me a nod, yes or no, if it made sense. And then it would go by the editor and the publisher, and so I'd have three people that would have veto power over it. And so that happened from time to time, where they would say, I don't understand this, or no, we're not going to, we're not going to run that. It means trouble. Or they would give a nod, and then I would ink it and finish it up, take it to the downstairs to the print shop, and put it on the page. I had about 5 national cartoons a week, and about 5 local cartoons. But that included what happened this week. Sometimes the cartoons were that the Gazette didn't have an interest in printing. I could go ahead and draw those up in the syndicate. They would appear someplace, and that happened quite a bit. It was just exciting to be around the reporters and get the ebb and flow of the news as they were capturing it on a daily basis. And it was fun because usually reporters in newsrooms are fairly liberal. And we had a little sign in our editorial department saying, "You are now leaving West Berlin." Nothing was really off limits. If it's an issue, if it's controversial, they like to see what they can do, but there are some limits. I mean, I could do a cartoon daily on some issues like abortion or something like that. And so they tend to say, well, if it was too graphic or something like that, they'd say, no, we can't run that. Some would get and draw a big reaction, and some wouldn't. When I felt like a cartoon was particularly hot, I would talk to the editors, and we'd discuss what, how we could either soften it or how we could make it fit better with the idea. So it was a collaborative effort sometimes. They didn't ever tell me what to draw, and I didn't ever tell them what they had to print, because obviously they have the paper and the ink and all of that. So everybody has free speech, but there are those boundaries where you can't go across and tell them what to print. They wouldn't tell me what to think. The cartoons I think were the best, were the ones that got the biggest negative feedback. I did get both, positive and negative. And when the Challenger blew up, I think I got all positive feedback on that cartoon. On some of the issues like Americans with Disabilities Act drew a big protest. Gay rights would draw large volumes of mail and phone calls. I think that the whole idea of growing up on a farm and sharing ideas with family and being able to separate the ideas from the people really helped, because people would call me and say, "Asay, you're an idiot," and and just really take off on me. And I had a soft approach back, and say, well, what particularly are you talking about? And then say, well, it was my worldview, and then I would explain my worldview, and then I'd say, what's your worldview? And we'd engage in a conversation on mail or phone or whatever, and that was probably the most exciting part of the job, was to be able to really talk about issues seriously with people. It was a real joy to leave work and know that I had accomplished something. I had made people think or mad or whatever, and it was a real fun job. It was something that I was born to be, I think.